Imagine this. You're watching the news, and some official makes a choice so obviously doomed to fail, you can't believe it wasn't stopped. You scroll through your feed and see a family member with the best intentions, sharing another wild conspiracy theory, like it's gospel truth. At work, someone confidently hands out advice that could financially ruin anyone who follows it. What do these people have in common? They're not villains. They're not plotting anything in secret. They're not hiding in some backroom spinning evil plans. What they have is something way more dangerous. Total confidence paired with catastrophic judgment. Let's rewind to 1986, Chernobyl. Most people blame the disaster on Soviet secrecy or bureaucratic dysfunction. And they're not wrong. But the real spark that lit the flame? It wasn't sabotage or sabotage-like intent. It was everyday engineers doing what they thought was a harmless safety test. Supervisors were chasing production targets. Officials delayed evacuation, not because they were heartless, but because they didn't want to trigger mass panic. Everyone involved genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. That's what made it terrifying. That's what made it deadly. It wasn't evil, it was stupidity, but not the loud, obvious kind. It was sincere, confident, everyday stupidity. And this kind of stupidity is everywhere. There's a term for it, actually, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Psychologists at Cornell discovered it. People who lack skill in a specific area often believe they're way better at it than they actually are. They don't just make bad decisions. They're convinced their decisions are brilliant. It's not just a funny internet meme. It's a measurable, repeatable human flaw. And the real problem is, these people don't just mess up their own lives. They ripple out. They destabilize whole systems. And they do it believing they're saving the day. And now, in the digital age, this kind of bad judgment is turbocharged. Our world is designed to reward the loudest, not the wisest. Social media algorithms don't care if what you say is true. They care if it gets clicks. They care if it gets shares. That means the more emotional, the more extreme, the more confident your message sounds, the more likely it is to go viral. Whether it's right or wrong, that's secondary. A 2018 MIT study looked at how info spreads on Twitter, and the results were brutal. False news spread 6 times faster than true stories. 6. And it wasn't bots pushing that garbage. It was real people. Ordinary users. People who honestly thought they were helping. A 2019 study found the same thing happening on Facebook, especially around election periods. The pattern is clear. The people spreading misinformation aren't evil masterminds. They're your aunt, your neighbor, that old high school friend you still follow. They believe they're doing good. And that's what makes it dangerous. Most misinformation isn't coming from bad actors or organized deception. According to the Reuters Institute, it's being spread by people who mean well. They're trying to protect others. They're trying to help, but they're wrong. And they're loud. And their confidence is contagious. But why does this happen? What's going on in the brain? It turns out, when you see something that aligns with what you already believe, your brain gives you a hit of dopamine. That's the same chemical that fuels addiction. It feels good to be right, even when you're dead wrong. And when people with weak critical thinking skills get that hit of dopamine, it builds a loop. They keep sharing the same types of ideas. They keep chasing that feeling, and they don't know they're trapped in it. Now think about how often you've seen someone share an article without reading it, just the headline, or how someone smart, really smart, falls for a scam because it sounds emotionally satisfying. That's not classic stupidity. That's a mismatch between confidence and competence. And when you pour gasoline on that, with platforms built for engagement, not truth, you get chaos. That's how poor judgment, once limited to the dinner table or office chatter, now becomes a global crisis. When anyone can broadcast their opinions to millions, sincere stupidity stops being a private flaw. It becomes a public threat. Now, let's dig deeper, because there's a pattern behind all this. A man named Carlo Cipolla, an Italian economic historian, laid it out clearly back in 1976. He didn't write a joke. He didn't write a rant. He wrote a serious piece of analysis called The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity. And if you understand these laws, you start seeing the world differently. Cipolla's first law: we always underestimate how many people are operating with dangerously poor judgment. Always. Even if you're already cynical, you're still overestimating how rational people are. You think that if someone's presented with the facts, they'll stop, think, and make a better decision. But that's your mistake. You're assuming they think like you. They don't. His second law cuts even deeper. Stupidity doesn't discriminate. It's not about education. It's not about income. It's not about status. Poor judgment shows up in every group. CEOs, PhDs, politicians, factory workers, parents, billionaires, you name it. You can't spot it just by looking at someone's credentials. Intelligence in one area doesn't protect you from making absurd mistakes in another. You could be a genius in engineering and fall for an obvious political hoax, or run a company and ruin your own finances by trusting the wrong people. Then comes the third law, and this is where Cipolla gives us a definition. He says, a person falls into the stupid category when they cause harm to others and to themselves, without any personal gain. They think they're being helpful, but their decisions create chaos, and they don't even benefit from it. Think of someone spreading dangerous medical misinformation. Their child gets sick. Other children get sick. Nobody wins. And yet, they still think they're doing the right thing. Now, here's the law that changes how we prepare for all this. Rational people consistently underestimate how dangerous stupid people are. Why? Because their behavior doesn't follow normal logic. You expect people to act in their own interest. You expect some kind of pattern. But stupidity creates chaos, random, unpredictable, lose-lose outcomes. And that makes it harder to guard against. The fifth law ties it all together. The person with consistently poor judgment is more dangerous than a criminal or a corrupt official. Why? Because at least criminals have motives. At least you can predict them. The corrupt might lie or steal, but they usually want something specific. You can block them, expose them, counter them. But people who cause harm while thinking they're helping, they're everywhere. And they're almost impossible to stop because they look like they're on your side. Let's put this into real-world terms. Cipolla mapped out human behavior using outcomes. 4 types of people. First, you have the intelligent. They create value for themselves and others. Think of Jonas Salk. He invented the polio vaccine and refused to patent it. He asked, "Could you patent the sun?" Then there's Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web and made it public. These are win-win thinkers. They build systems that benefit everyone. Second, you have the bandits. They harm others for personal gain. You might hate them, but they're at least rational. A CEO cuts corners to boost profits. A scammer steals money from gullible investors. It's selfish, but it's predictable. And predictability is power. You can regulate, protect, prepare. Third are the helpless. These are the chronic overgivers. They sacrifice themselves to help others. Think of nurses who burn out from doing too much, or employees who keep taking on unpaid overtime, trying to be helpful until they can't function. Their self-sacrifice often enables broken systems. And then, last, you have the stupids. They create lose-lose scenarios. They hurt others. They hurt themselves. And they walk away thinking they did the right thing. Imagine a parent who refuses to vaccinate their child because of a debunked rumor. The child gets sick. The community suffers. Other children die. The parent loses money, time, and health. No one wins. And they still believe they made the best choice. This pattern isn't always driven by a lack of intelligence. Sometimes it's driven by emotion, by fear, identity, or the desire to belong. When emotions run high, even smart people can fall into stupidity. That's why it's domain-specific. A brilliant scientist can fall for a political scam. A high-powered CEO can fall for health misinformation. It's not about raw IQ. It's about being outside your depth and not knowing it. The modern world has made this worse. Because the internet gives everyone a microphone, the confident and wrong have the biggest reach. And when algorithms amplify emotion, sincerity turns into a weapon. The more convinced someone is, the more persuasive they sound. Even when they're dangerously wrong. When we try to argue with them, they double down. Psychology calls it belief persistence. When you confront people with contradictory evidence, it doesn't always make them rethink. It often makes them more certain. Their brain goes into defense mode. They don't question the belief. They reject the challenge. Think of the Salem witch trials. People genuinely believed they were protecting their town from supernatural threats. But every time someone was executed, it reinforced their fear. It created a loop: more fear, more accusations, more executions. They weren't evil, they were just wrong. Loudly, confidently, destructively wrong. What Carlo Cipolla called stupidity is often driven less by intelligence gaps and more by emotional wiring. Fear, tribal loyalty, the need to protect one's identity. These forces short-circuit reason. They create a lens where facts become threats, and disagreement feels like betrayal. That's why people can be brilliant in one area and completely irrational in another. They're not dumb across the board. They're just emotionally compromised or operating way outside their niche. And this is where it gets even more dangerous, when stupidity is built into the system. Sometimes it's not individuals making terrible decisions. It's entire structures designed in a way that rewards poor judgment. Social media is a prime example. These platforms are built by smart people, engineers, data scientists, marketers, but the systems they've created encourage the spread of misinformation. Not because they want chaos, but because chaos gets clicks. Engagement becomes more valuable than truth. And suddenly, you've got a global feedback loop where outrage, fear, and misinformation rise to the top. Not because of bad people, but because of bad incentives. This isn't new. History is full of examples. Look at the Roman Empire. They kept devaluing their currency to fund programs that made them popular in the short term. Every generation of leadership thought it was a smart move. But in the long run, it helped sink the empire. These weren't evil emperors. They were just trapped in a system that rewarded stupidity, masked as pragmatism. So, how do we fix it? How do we survive in a world where confident misjudgment is a feature, not a bug? You don't fix stupidity by preaching reason. That's the trap. You fix it by designing around it. You assume it's there, because it is. And then you build systems strong enough to handle it. Take pre-mortems, for example. In project planning, teams imagine failure before it happens. They ask, if this idea fails, what's the most likely reason? That simple question surfaces blind spots while you still have time to address them. Or look at Wikipedia. Everyone has bias, but Wikipedia requires citations. It doesn't trust individual brilliance, it trusts verifiable sources. That's a system built to protect itself from emotional reasoning, even when editors are passionate. In aviation, even the best pilots follow checklists, not because they're incompetent, but because they know competence fails under pressure. Step-by-step systems save lives. They make human error survivable. Even democratic institutions follow this principle. We don't expect voters to always be rational. That's why we build in checks and balances, term limits, separation of powers, judicial review. These features don't assume wisdom, they assume flaws. And they're designed to keep one person's bad decision from sinking the whole ship. Markets do the same thing. We have bankruptcy laws, consumer protections, diversification requirements, not because we expect every investor to be a genius, but because we know most of us won't be. The goal isn't to eliminate bad decisions, it's to make sure one doesn't trigger total collapse. The biggest takeaway from Cipolla's work isn't that stupidity exists, it's that it's common. It's part of the human condition, and that means the people who thrive in the future won't be the ones who assume logic always wins. They'll be the ones who design with humility, who acknowledge human flaws and build safety nets around them. That takes maturity. It takes moral complexity, because it means holding two truths at the same time. Every person deserves dignity and respect, and not every person can make high-stakes decisions well. It's not about creating a class system. It's about designing guardrails that protect everyone, including people who mean well but make bad calls. History is full of well-meaning disasters. The French aristocracy didn't wake up one day and decide to trigger a revolution. They inherited a broken system. They made short-sighted choices. They didn't understand what was coming. They weren't villains. They were just unprepared. And their ignorance blew up the very system that sustained them. So, what now? We need to recognize that poor judgment isn't an outlier. It's a constant. It's not always evil. Sometimes it's our neighbor. Sometimes it's us. The point isn't shame. The point is systems. Systems that catch our mistakes before they hurt too many people. Systems that assume emotion will hijack logic. Systems that don't rely on individuals being brilliant all the time. Because wisdom doesn't spread by accident, it travels from person to person, one conversation, one idea, one insight at a time. And that means it starts with you. If this video helped you see the world more clearly, or reminded you of a conversation you've been meaning to have, share it. Someone you know might be stuck in one of those loops without realizing it. And sometimes all it takes is one message to break that cycle. The question isn't, how do we eliminate stupidity? That's impossible. The real question is, how do we build a world that works despite it? And if you're still watching, comment, "Design Beyond Judgment," to let us know you made it to the end. Subscribe to the channel if you want more insights that make you question everything and think deeper about the systems we all live in. And share this with someone who needs to hear it, because truth only wins when we carry it, one mind at a time.